Hi there, today we're going to talk macros. So when we're feeding our horses, often people are looking at adding supplements and little bits and pieces to try and see if they can get the desired effect for their horses. But we need to be looking at the macros in the diet to see whether they're okay before we look at the micronutrients. Macros are nutrients that are required by the horse in large amounts. There's a bit of a trend in human diets towards looking at macros, and that really is simple calculations of overall carbohydrates, fats and proteins. In terms of a horse's macro requirements, I consider water, digestible energy, carbohydrates, proteins and fats to be the major macros that we look at initially. Water seems like a simple requirement, but I think sometimes it's the most often overlooked. There can be quite detrimental health effects to a horse not drinking enough water. Bearing in mind an average 500 kilogram horse can drink 30 to 45 litres per day of water. We need to make sure they have that much available to them, clean water that they're happy to drink. This requirement often varies a little bit. For example, if a horse is on pasture, they get some of their water requirement from the pasture. If they exercise a lot, they obviously require more. So now for the food component. Often people, like I suggested in the intro, are looking for the micronutrients or the something they can add without double checking that the macros are well balanced. And really, this is the best place to start. So why does it bother me so much that we look at the micronutrients in great detail? One, obviously, looking at the macros first is the most important. But if you're doing a diet analysis, however you're doing that, my guesses are that one, you haven't weighed your horse on a weigh bridge, so that weight is a guess. Even the weigh tapes are really quite fallible. Number two, if your horse is out at pasture, how much in weight do you know that it really does eat? I think that's a bit of a guess as well. In terms of forage, either your pasture or hay, it must be tested to have an idea of how much your horse is getting. And hay needs to be tested, every batch from every different supplier, and even your pasture should be tested 4 times a year throughout the different seasons and each year, because it changes so much due to climatic conditions. So when you look at all those guesses that we're making in terms of balancing a horse's diet, you can see that not getting those macros right first is really quite silly. So number one, overall energy. So it's really important that your horse gets the correct amount of digestible energy. Your horse will not put weight on, no matter what supplement you add, unless it's getting the digestible energy in its diet that it needs to maintain its weight. It's quite simple. If your horse is fat, it's getting too much energy. If it's lean, it's probably not getting enough. There's a couple of ways to check how much digestible energy that your horse needs if you want to be a little bit more particular about it. One is look up some of the horse body scoring systems and do a visual and do it in a more structured way than just having a look at your horse, and decide what body score your horse is at and whether that's an okay one. Another resource freely available is through the nutrient requirements for horses. I'm going to put a link in the comments below for you, but you can go in there, add a few details about your horse and get a rough idea of how much digestible energy it should be getting. The next important thing to look at is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are actually the main energy source for a horse. Carbohydrates come into the horse's diet through forage, hay, grain and grain byproducts. Our main aim in this is to increase the fibre content but decrease the amount of sugar in the carbohydrates that are being fed to your horse. Your horse requires at least 1.5 to 2% of its body weight in forage. So in a horse that's just being fed hay as its main source of forage, You really need a 500 kilogram horse is going to need between 7.5 and 10 kilos of hay a day. Ideally, this hay is low in the non-structural carbohydrates or lower in the sugars and high in the structural carbohydrates or the fibre to help with the digestive system. This is a generality depending on the weight of the horse as well as its metabolic and veterinary condition. So be guided by your vet if you need to. You can reduce that if the situation warrants it. But in a horse without any issues, this is a really good guideline. So have a think, does your horse get enough of this? Do you weigh it to make sure it gets enough? This is a really significant thing, can cause a lot of hindgut issues and a lot of behavioural problems if your horse is not simply getting enough forage. The next one's protein. Protein is also very important. It's used to build up muscle. It's used to create enzymes, proteins, and involved in so many body processes. Irrespective of whether you're supplying your horse enough digestible energy or not, if it isn't getting enough protein, it simply won't build muscle. Funnily enough, this is vice versa as well. So if your horse is getting plenty of protein but not enough digestible energy, you're still not going to see that top line you're looking for. The type of protein you provide is quite significant, so we need to look at quality and quantity hand in hand when you're adding in protein. And to find a rough guide for your horse's protein requirements, you can again go back to that nutrient requirements for horses link that I've got in the comments. Fats are required in the body to carry fat-soluble vitamins and other body processes, and also to provide essential fatty acids that the horse doesn't synthesize for itself. We don't really see horses that are deficient in fat, so the importance of fat in the diet is really about providing enough digestible energy for a horse without the addition of grain, sugar, and excess carbohydrates that are going to cause our hindgut issues. So they're the major components of your horse's diet. Please, if you're having a problem with your horse, go back and check that they are covered first. Then when we go down to looking at minerals, there are also macro and micro minerals. The macro minerals that are required by your horse are calcium and phosphorus, and these really need to be in an ideal ratio. There is sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium and sulfur. They're our macro minerals. So any other minerals that we're supplying to our horse are micro minerals and required in much lesser amounts. So I'm not saying here that those micro minerals or micronutrients aren't important to your horse. However, when you're looking to see if you've got a balanced diet, please start from the top down rather than the bottom up. Make sure there's enough forage in the diet, the horse is getting enough digestible energy and enough protein. Adding fat in if you need is a safe way to add energy. And looking at your macro minerals. Make sure these are okay before you start adding the micro minerals into the diet. They are not a golden button that are going to solve your horse's issues. Quite often by sorting out the macros, you're going to solve some of this problem as well. Thanks for listening. I'm sure you found it useful. I'm going to drill down on some of these macros a little bit more in some other videos. So please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel so that you can get notifications of my further releases. If you haven't done so already, hop over to my website, www.kazadansEquestrian.com. Fill in the pop-up subscription form and receive your free ebook on horse preventative health.